on our Musically Speaking tonight, yes, we feature a female artist, a songwriter and a singer. She's also a dope performer. Ladies and gentlemen, allow me to introduce Jerai.
Hello, and thank you for joining us for Lunchtime News on KBC Channel 1. It's coming to live from the broadcasting house in Kenya's capital, Nairobi. My name is Giverson, Maina, and our sign language interpreter is Lensa Odingo. So join us for the next 1 hour for news within, of course, across the country. And straight, let's take away to Kiambu County, where retired President Uhuru Kenyatta is addressing delegates of Kiambu County. Take a listen.
Sasa mkuje muambiwe siasa ingine ya ukabila itawaletea nini isipokuwa shida? Musikubali. Mulenge mbele. Mulenge mabadiliko ambaye itainua hali ya neba wako. Awe Mukikuyu, awe Mukalenjin, awe Mujaluo, awe Mukamba, awe Mkisii, awe Mudigo. Huyo neba wako ndio unastahili kuinua. Akiinuka hata wewe umeinuka. Ama ni namna gani? Na nyinyi vijana ambao mnatafuta uongozi, tafuteni uongozi kwa njia ya kueleza vijana wenzenu vile mtawabadilishia maisha, vile mtawapatia kazi, vile mtatengeneza mitaa yao, vile mtashirikiana na wao waweze kuwa Wakenya ambao wanajivunia na wanafurahia nchi yao. That is my friends. Hii Kiambu yenu ila ngapi hapa wanaishi? Kaenda Henania. Yeah? Yes. Na mumewakaribisha na wanaishi hapa. Na wanafanya kazi zao na biashara zao. Wengine mumewachagua kuwa ma MCA. Wengine mumewachagua kwa vyeo mbalimbali katika biashara. Kwa sababu ya vile mnajuana na hawa kama viongozi. Sio kwa vile mumejuana na hawa kwa sababu. Tumeelewa na wenzangu? Kenya ni ya na pati, hapo ndipo kwako. Ujifurahie, ujivunie na ukatae kuletewa siasa ya
Now that is retired President Uhuru Kenyatta, and of course the Jubilee Party leader addressing Kiambu Delegates Forum at Kiambu Golf Club. And of course, we'll get back there to hear what the retired president has to say. And right now, let's take you to another forum where the National Cohesion, or rather the NCIC, is speaking or rather addressing on matters political intolerance ahead of the next year's general election. And let's take you there. Let's have a listen.
ethnic incitement, vilification of others, incitement to cause harm, or advocacy of hatred based on any ground of discrimination contemplated under Article 27, Subarticle 4 of the Constitution. Article 33, Subarticle 3 further requires every person in exercising the right to freedom of expression to respect the rights and reputation of others. Article 10 enshrines national unity, human dignity, and social justice as binding national values. The National Cohesion and Integration Act 7N render ethnic contempt and hate speech as criminal offenses. These are not aspirational ideals. They are legal obligations binding upon every Kenyan without exception. Therefore, we condemn in the strongest terms possible all forms of hate speech, ethnic contempt, political incitement, and violent rhetoric, irrespective of the political affiliation, social standing, or public profile of those responsible. No political cause, however, passionately held, justifies the dehumanization of fellow citizens. No electoral ambition warrants the inflaming of ethnic tensions. No grievance, legitimate or otherwise, excuses the incitement of violence against any person or community. We are equally concerned by the misuse of digital platforms to spread divisive content, coordinate harassment campaigns, and amplify inflammatory material. Online hate speech carries the same legal consequences as utterances made in public. Those who believe that the anonymity of a screen or the speed of a share exempts them from accountability are mistaken. The Commission is monitoring both the physical and digital spheres with vigilance. We remind all political leaders, elected officials, aspirants, party officials, and opinion shapers that leadership is not a license to divide. It's a solemn obligation to unite. Those who occupy or seek positions of public trust must demonstrate by word and deed that they are worthy of that trust. Leadership that thrives on fear, contempt, and division does not serve the nation. It endangers the nation. No one is above the law. Political influence does not confer immunity from accountability. The Commission will not be deterred by rank, prominence, or affiliation when discharging its mandate. Any individual, regardless of position, found to have violated the National Cohesion and Integration Act 2008 will be subject to the full range of remedial and punitive measures available, including prosecutions where the evidence so warrants. Kenya has traversed difficult chapters in its democratic journey. Had lessons.
Now that is the new chairperson of the National and Integration Commission, NCIC, Bishop Dr. Nyamoya Kefa, addressing matters of political intolerance. Now, away from that, leaders allied to the Jubilee Party in Juja, Kiambu County, have accused the Kenya Kwanza administration of persistently attacking the former head of state, Uhuru Kenyatta, instead of addressing the country's growing economic and social challenges. This is a section of Orange Democratic Movement members in Kwale County who expressed dissatisfaction with mining and Blue Economic Cabinet Secretary Hassan Joho for supporting Kwale Governor Fatuma Achani, who was elected on a United Democratic Alliance UDA ticket.
Speaking to journalists in Juja, the leaders defended Uhuru's legacy, arguing that his administration left behind stable systems in education and healthcare, while also undertaking major infrastructure projects across the country. Their remarks come days after United Democratic Alliance Secretary General Hassan Omar sparked political debate after linking the former president's dynasty to what he described as historical dominance of the country's economy and political power.
We cannot be a tribal community if we are willing, Jubilee is willing to hand over power to people of different castes and of different tribes.
Kini changamoto zimekuwa ni mingi. Ukikuja huku mashinani ndio utajua watu wako na mashida. Tafadhali fanya jambo.
Elsewhere, Orange Democratic Movement members drawn from Kwale County have expressed dissatisfaction with Mining and Blue Economy Cabinet Secretary Hassan Joho for supporting Kwale Governor Fatuma Achani, warning him against endorsing Achani for a second term. They have threatened to protest against Joho and Achani's partnership, claiming that the move seeks to deny Kenyans the opportunity to exercise their democratic right.
Kama anafanya siasa, amfanyie siasa Ruto. Lakini si kupanda kwa majukwaa tena kuja kumfanyia siasa Achani. Sisi hatuko pamoja na Achani. Sisi tumesema tunataka kurudisha kwa factory settings. Tunataka kurudisha hii county 2013.
Governor Joe tunamsihi na wale viongozi wote wa Kwale kwa ujumla. Mature to your age, play your politics wherever you are. Siasa ya Kwale ibaki Kwale kama ilivyo.
And Mavoko Member of Parliament Patrick Makau has urged Machakos County Commissioner to guarantee security for the Linda Mwananchi faction ahead of their planned rally in the county on Sunday 31st May 2026. This is after the legislature accused the section of political leaders for hiring goons to disrupt the Linda Mwananchi rallies.
Tunaomba kura na tunashindana na hao. Kwa hivyo wakubali kwamba tunashindana, maneno ya kutumia polisi, maneno ya kutumia goons isiwe hiyo ndio kisingizio kusema ati Linda Mwananchi ni hivi ama vile. Tunataka tushindane. We want a level ground for every competitor in the 2027 presidential race.
The Linda Mwananchi team is expected to tour Mitituni, Machakos Town and Mulolongo. Kasichana Masha, Lunchtime News.
Now, Kiambu Women Representative Anwar Muradha has called for political tolerance and peaceful coexistence among Kenyans. Now, Muradha remarks follow the death of Richu Wandeto, which several leaders linked to rising political intolerance in the country. Now, speaking in Kirugoya, Kirinyaga Central MP, the Member of Parliament Gashoki Gitare, also condoled with the family of the deceased and called for Interior Cabinet Secretary Kipchumba Murkomen to ensure all those involved in Wandeto's death are arrested and prosecuted.
Wandeto, na tunasema tukiwa hapa Kirinyaga ya kwamba Mungu aliye mbinguni awaone na alipishie baba yake na mume wake na watoto wake kisasi kwa kile ambacho wamefanya. To practice political tolerance. I necessarily don't have to say what you are saying. You may want to be one term or two term or forever term or a quarter term or a low term, but we have a country to protect, and that is Kenya.
I'm following up this case until I see people have been arrested and taken to court at jail. Mimi will not arrest. I'll do that with this team. Hiyo kazi tutafanya, hata nitawashika tuende kwa Murkomen, tuende kwa DA, kwa IG, every office that will go, so that we make sure these people are arrested and punished.
Now, boards of management from 9 coffee cooperative societies in Kisii have been trained on cooperative governance, leadership and child labor prevention by the International Labour Organization ILO under the African Project. Now, the National Project Officer for the ACCL-EL project, Duncan Chando, noted that the training incorporated internationally recognized ILO tools to strengthen cooperative governance and improve economic resilience for smallholder smallholder producers. Now, the ILO tools would assist in integrating child labor prevention in cooperative policies, member sensitization programs, and day-to-day leadership practices. One of the trainers, Duncan Mageka, noted that the training of 45 trainees will reduce the trend of children being involved in coffee picking and transportation to the societies, and hence improve attendance in schools.
For the past 5 days, we've been training board of management of various cooperative society. Those are 9 cooperative society. And the main objective of this training is basically to help them to strengthen their capacity. But at the same time also, we are looking at issues around child labor and how the cooperative society play a very important role when it comes to addressing issues around child labor.
We've been seeing like all the children, in fact, during school days and off school days, they are usually involved in maybe picking coffee, taking coffee to the society, among other stuff. So this is why we want to tell the people that we should eliminate child labor and ensure that our children go to school.
And for generations, the Loita Maasai relied on indigenous knowledge to predict weather patterns, move livestock, and sustain their pastoral way of life. But today, changing climate conditions, prolonged drought, and shrinking grazing land are forcing many families to abandon traditions that have defined them for centuries. In the sacred Loita forest of Narok South community is now struggling to adapt as nature becomes increasingly unpredictable. Aaron Murray brings us the story of people caught between culture, climate change, and survival.
For generations, the Loita Maasai could read the sky like a book. The flowering of trees, the direction of the wind, the movement of birds, all spoke of rain. And when the elders spoke, the community listened. Life here depended on livestock. Cattle meant food, wealth, and identity.
Maasai cannot stay without livestock. They cannot be comfortable. Even if they aid land only, they can't. They must balance so that they can have both livestock and farming, because the livestock are everything. Yeah. It's celebration when you have ceremonies. You must have meat, you must have milk, and the children can't stay without.
Families moved with the seasons, following pasture and water across communal land. The forest protected them from drought, and tradition protected the forest. But slowly, the signs began to fail. The rains delayed and season changed. The sky stopped speaking the language the elders understood. Now, many families are abandoning pure pastoralism. Communal grazing land is slowly fading with the recent demarcation move.
They had to change tact since many of their animals had died. And you know that the Maasai community depends on livestock, and they don't have any other way of earning a living apart from increasing the number of their livestock.
Young people who once measured wealth in cattle are now turning to farming, charcoal burning, and casual jobs to survive.
Change has hit the Maasai community. For over the years, they have been relying on livestock keeping, but with the change of the climate, they're now shifting to agriculture.
However, in the attempt of agriculture, there is a striking fear. A community once guided entirely by nature now depends increasingly on modern focused and changing livelihoods.
People, they have initial piece of land where they have where they are doing agriculture. When they find it not productive, they will opt to leave this already degraded land and probably continue to at least to do a new piece of land that is hoping they will get more production than the earlier piece.
We have housing land.
However, bodies like WWF and Haki Jamii are coming in offering education to the indigenous communities and journalists across the region on climate reporting.
So what we do is to amplify voices of indigenous communities, indigenous population and local communities. So we have been working with this indigenous population for some time, but now we have to ensure that their voices are amplified, and the best way to do this is to engage the media.
There is a lot of information that we do not really share with our audience, especially on indigenous knowledge. And there is a major role that even the minority in the community play. This involves women, this involves people with a disability, and I think it's high time that we close these gaps and bring everyone together.
I'm working towards climate change and disability inclusion.
We as the Loita community, we are attached to our land and to our resources very positively. In spiritual matters, we attach ourselves to the forest of the Loita child. We also attach ourselves to our land, to our cattle, because without land, there will be no Maasai.
The county government is also joining with pushing policies that will help in the forest conservation.
We also normally have a program for tree planting, at least every first Friday of every month. We have a program called Chiefs Climate Day that chiefs in all the locations plant trees in their respective areas of jurisdiction.
We are trying to integrate the knowledge of the locals with scientific, so that at least you have an hybrid information. We don't push projects to the communities. It is actually the community to do proposal to us. We do also public participation through PCRA. PCRA is actually is a comprehensive report from the communities.
For elders, the transformation is painful. Sacred forests are shrinking and indigenous wealth and knowledge is becoming unreliable.
The one we were using now, it's not working. Because when we try to apply what we used to apply there before, it is not giving us the best.
Climate change has forced Loita forest population into a difficult balance between survival and preservation. A community once guided entirely by nature now depends increasingly on modern-focused and changing livelihoods because they know when the forest disappears, part of their identity disappears with it. Reporting from Loita in Narok South, for KBC Channel 1, I'm Aaron Marie.
No, thank you, Aaron Murray, for that report. Now, the Media Council of Kenya has intensified efforts to combat misinformation on social media by equipping secondary school students with skills to identify fake news. Now, speaking during Student Journalism Expo at Homa Bay High School, the council's Director for Media Training and Development, Victor Buire, emphasized the need to train youth on responsible media use. Take a look.
Youth being sensitized on responsible production and consumption of media content, be it digital or online, especially that there's too much happening in the media space in terms of information. There's an information overload, and many times we get people, even old people like us, getting wrong information, misinformation and the rest. But this one we are targeting youth in formal schools because it's easier a bit to get them. We have big issue of access to harmful content like pornography, dating sites that they can be kidnapped and other things. So again, how do we help them start understanding on which safe sites they can access for example, information purposes, if they are doing studies, their life-saving skills like first aid, they can learn on their own.
Now, matters health now. Plastic and cosmetic surgeons in Kenya are questioning the public to conduct due diligence before undergoing cosmetic surgery procedures amid a growing demand for aesthetic treatments in the country. Now, dermatologist Dr. Pranav Pankoli noted that some patients have ended up with severe complications and botched surgeries due to unqualified practitioners and unsafe medical practices.
There have been a few clinics that have not followed strict ethical, medical, and legal guidelines. And this is one of the reasons why there is a huge need and demand for somebody with ethics that is going to run an establishment the way it is supposed to be done. When things are too cheap, think twice, especially when it is your body.
If you look at the World Health Organization, they have actually classified mental health as part of a public health. And you know, if you don't look beautiful, your mental health is not good, isn't it? And we are all beautiful at different areas.
And now, AMREF Kenya has officially launched the Future for Binti program, primarily targeting the prevention of female genital mutilation (FGM) and child early and forced marriage and unions. The program will also promote positive cultural and social social norms, to of course uphold gender equality and human rights, while encouraging the active involvement of men, boys, religious leaders, and elders, as well as champions to change within communities. Now, the Future for Binti program aims to advance gender equality and eliminate harmful practices affecting girls and young women. Stakeholders noted that the program is expected to strengthen community resilience and promote social transformation in Mandera County by increasing the protection of girls and young women from harmful cultural practices.
Future for Binti Inception meeting here is here to fight the harmful practice. So we are here partnering with AMREF, CAC and Young to fight against these harmful practices in our community and try our best to minimize the prevalence rate that is currently at a higher level in our county.
Our aim is that as many girls as possible in this county do not undergo FGM and that they do not undergo child marriage and that they are able to achieve their full potential by ensuring that they are in school and that they are safeguarded.
We have established a rescue center at the Mandera Referral Hospital. And also, we have established a gender desk at the Mandera Police Station. And I think we were approaching also schools for mentorship programs.
And now let's head to the County of Laikipia, where the Director of Minority and Marginalized Affairs Unit, Josephat Lowoi, has emphasized that the minority policy is intended to guarantee equal rights and fair access to opportunities for all communities in Kenya. Now, Lowoi, who was speaking during the launch of the first ever Laikipia Minority Festival in Laikipia North, said that the initiative is focused on fostering equality, social justice, and inclusive development among all citizens. He further noted that thousands of residents are said to benefit from various community programs and registration drives aimed at enhancing livelihoods and promoting economic empowerment.
Sijaona jamii ya Borana, Somali, sijaona. Nilikuwa nataka moja kwa kila jamii tuwaone.
Rais ametupatia nafasi ya watu 1,200 watarejistiwa SHA. Wenye wamerejistiwa hii wiki kuanzia juzi na leo, tutachukua hiyo majina walipiwe na serikali ili waweze kuingia kwa huduma yetu ya SHA. Wale wasee na wale watu ambaye wako na miaka 70, miaka 60 na hawajai pata ile pesa ya wazee, tunachukua watu 50,000. Hiyo ni kuanzia tu, tunaanza naye.
Na ni mambo mzuri, hata mkiona nyuma yangu unaona vile watu wamepiga laini ni kipande ndio wanachukua. Na hawako na kipande kwa muda. Na tunafurahia sana mambo ya serikali hii kututolea vetting. Kwa sababu babu yangu mimi alikuja hapa Laikipia 1890 kama British Army.
Sisi sote tumekuwa jamii moja siku ya leo, tumehimiza urafiki, hakuna tena vita, na hiyo ni kitu ya maana sana.
Another story from Laikipia County takes us to a very short commercial breather. Don't go too far, there's still so much more lined up for you.
The event brought together young girls from across Nairobi for a day centered on confidence, self-expression, and celebrating their potential.
Our spotlight artist tonight, we feature Ambassa Mandela. On our Musically Speaking tonight, yes, we feature a female artist, a songwriter, and a singer. She's also a dope performer. Ladies and gentlemen, allow me to introduce Jerai.
Sasa hizi ndio zawadi umeniletea.
Kumbe Moshe Ochwangi alituweka katika pili kama sunde ameandikwa nini? Mkubi ameandika vizuri, tunagawua sisi kwa wili, wewe unaenda kuongeza mwingine.
Umesikia bununu? Tuna trend. Ni kitu gani unanitafuta mimi?
Huyu mama daya ni mchambusito. Ai.
Milioni 3.
Nilipe pesa zangu.
Wenda hata kama ni kwa chifu.
Utafungwa, ngoja niende polisi.
Ole matope! Ole matope kuja bwana. Huko kimeumana.
And welcome back. You're watching Lunchtime News on KBC Channel 1. Now, the national and county governments have been challenged to include mental health illnesses in the health insurance SHA to reduce the burden on the patients and caretakers. Now, according to statistics, mental health challenges have escalated at a very precipitous rate in Kenya, with the Ministry of Health indicating that approximately 1 in 4 people seeking healthcare in Kenya exhibits symptoms of a mental health condition. Around 12.2% of the affected population is adolescents and youth. Now, speaking during the African Center of Rehabilitative and Mental Wellness and Awareness Sensitization Program, CEO Elvis Ndongo termed drug abuse and alcoholism as contributing to rising numbers of mental challenges, specifically among the youth owing to unemployment.
We want to request our governor, since mental health is a pandemic in our country, if we can include the mental illness in Kangata care. So we request him also to introduce the same in SHA.
Mental health is for me and you because we have so many challenges in our life. We have gone through developmental stages. Our coping strategies may change from the time we were young until now, and every single event that has happened in your life has an impact on it. Therefore, you are struggling with something, and the way you can easily access health services.
Now, the national government has distributed enough textbooks for every learner in all public schools across the country through the Ministry of Education. According to the Chief Executive Officer of the Kenya Institute of Curriculum Development, Professor Charles Ongondo, all learners now have adequate textbooks for every subject. Now, speaking during the commissioning of a modern library built through funding from the Ministry of Education at a Forstall Secondary School in Lugari Sub-County, Professor Charles Ongondo describes the competency-based education system as more effective and urged parents to fully embrace it. Now, area legislator Nabina Bwera strongly opposed proposals by some leaders seeking the abolition of school uniform.
Every learner in a public school shall have a textbook in every subject on a 1-to-1 ratio. KICD is currently in charge of that work. My colleague principals who are here, I'm waiting for any of you to tell me that you are lacking textbooks today. I want to ask the ministry to provide extra resources to KICD for the digital learning so that they can bridge the gap for the lack of teachers in certain subjects.
And now let's get to business. Flour farms have issued notices to cut jobs, citing supply chain disruption linked to the Middle East crisis and soaring fuel prices that have driven up production and shipping cost. The Agricultural Employers Association CEO Wesley Ciele says several farms have begun redundancy processes as growers struggle to stay afloat. Now, speaking in Naivasha, Ciele further said the situation has been worsened by rising fertilizer prices and delayed VAT refunds worth more than 10 billion shillings.
We have received letters requesting for us to process the redundancies in the farms, and I think this is not a time when things should be taken like business as usual. We need to relook at how things need to change. Diversification of market has happened, so you'll find some of our flowers go to Australia, to Europe, but a big market also is in the Middle East. So with the war which is there in Iran, I think we definitely have been affected.
We've seen increased in cost in our inputs. We've seen disruptions in our order. All our input into the coming to the farm, the prices have gone up. I'll give an example. One of our key inputs, calcium nitrate, in our industry has doubled the last 3 months.
And now on the international front now, Uganda has appealed to the international community for funds to contain the Ebola virus. Now, Ugandan officials say a significant amount of funds is needed to support surveillance, lab testing, case management, and of course, border preparedness in high-risk areas. Now, here are the details of this and other stories making headlines across the borders.
3 new cases of Ebola virus disease have been confirmed in Uganda, bringing the total number of confirmed infections to 5 in the country. These are the first locally detected Ebola cases recorded in Uganda since the outbreak began in the neighboring Democratic Republic of Congo. Health officials and disease experts meeting in Kampala say the next 3 months will be critical in containing the Ebola virus and preventing cross-border transmission. Uganda is also seeking support to set up a dedicated facility near the DRC border for people crossing over seeking treatment, an effort aimed at reducing the risk of importing cases. Meanwhile, rising fuel prices has pushed Morocco to accelerate the shift to cleaner power, with the government looking at a longer-term strategy built around renewable energy and energy sovereignty. Morocco is spending about $160 million a month to soften the impact of rising fuel prices on households and businesses. For many Moroccans, higher fuel prices are no longer just an issue at the pump. They're feeding into daily transport costs and public mobility choices. Although fossil fuel supplies are needed in the immediate term, authorities say Morocco's forward-looking response is not to return to oil refining, but to accelerate the shift toward cleaner power. Finally, tens of thousands of demonstrators hit the streets in Rome in protest against rising fuel costs and soaring living expenses, which have been exacerbated by regional conflicts and arms expansion. The protesters say high fuel prices caused by geopolitical tensions, along with declining purchasing power due to stagnant incomes, have made it difficult for many ordinary workers to make ends meet. In 2025, Italy declared to NATO that its military spending accounted for 2% of its GDP, a significant increase compared to 1.54% in 2024. In response, the protesters say at a time when ordinary people are facing increasing pressures in their lives, the Italian government is allocating large sums of money to military spending.
And away from that now, on our interactive segment, we are joined by Patrick Mwangi Karanja, who is a Senior Manager for Technology and Digital Transformation for Africa at Tony Blair Institute of Global Change, also known as TBI, to discuss matters digital inclusion. And to start us off, Africa is accelerating its digital transformation agenda. But what does it mean? How, or rather, what does meaningful digital inclusion actually look like for ordinary citizens in the perspective of TBI?
Thank you, Giverson, for the opportunity to share some of the perspectives and what we are observing across the continent. So we work in over 17 countries, and we have seen the opportunity for digital transformation to accelerate development.
Yeah.
When we talk about inclusion, then development comes automatically with wanting to have and needing to have everyone in the journey. Practical examples of how we see this being important in digital inclusion is when you look at the spectrum of the components that make digital economy, whether that would be infrastructure, that is access to devices, for example, digital literacy, or whether that looks at services, for example, in governments conducting or giving services to citizens through e-platforms. And we've seen that in Rwanda, we've seen that in Kenya, and we're seeing other countries where governments are leveraging technology to increase efficiency and reach. But as you've said, it also comes with consideration. How do we ensure that all people are involved in that process? And it means that the government has to work with private sector and other actors to ensure that, for example, population segments that may be left behind in, for instance, devices are catered for. And so policies will need to be positive, and we need to be inclusive in terms of cost structure, in terms of subsidies and components like those ones. When you look at connectivity, connectivity is a big challenge. Those who have ability to buy data bundles may not necessarily be the same as those who are trying to fend for themselves because they may not be on the same economic positions. And so governments need to step in by provisioning opportunities and investments or attracting investments to increase connectivity or to have connectivity opportunities that ensure that we are inclusive, especially for Africa, young people. So when you think of young people, we have examples where governments have an opportunity of putting, say, hubs, ICT hubs, and these hubs therefore enable youth to have access to digital skills, opportunities, even including employment opportunities, because there are investments and interventions that have enabled that inclusion.
Speaking of hubs, this particular government, the Kenya Kwanza administration, has been on the forefront of, creating these digital hubs for in every constituency across the country, in what they call digital jobs for the Kenyan young people. Have you been involved in any way in establishing these particular hubs in Kenya?
So, if you ask ourselves as a firm, that would be yes. But I think let's step back and think about the context of Africa, and you've given a very good example, hubs, because that's a very innovative example of how governments can ensure rapid inclusion in this sector. The digital economy sector is moving very, very fast. We say computers have a lifespan of 3 years, and after that you have it's obsolete. It's one of the fastest growing sectors. To come to your point about have we been involved and how do we see this? Across the continent, we've seen a continuous challenge of targeting the most valuable part of our population. Our median age across the continent is about 19-20 years, which means that majority of our population is young people. These young people need economic opportunities. But again, across the continent, we are seeing that the economic development and progress may not be matching the number of young people who are coming into the workplace. Digital hubs are an excellent platform for enabling young people, one, in giving them exposure and skills in being able to navigate and work in the digital economy. And then secondly is that there are digital jobs, and some of them are so interesting, Jarvis, because they do not require that a young person has to leave their location. They can do a remote job and get paid while they're in that location, sometimes at rates that would even be better than if they were leaving and going to another location.
But are there meaningful jobs for the Kenyan youth in that space?
Yes, indeed. I've been lucky, and I think we've been lucky to see very interesting examples where young people, for example, in tech, engineering or networking, get jobs here that are at the higher tier if you were thinking about the pay gap or the pay and the pay rate. And I think in many ways those are meaningful jobs. Meaningful because they, one, utilize and enable the young person to use the skills they have learned in school or they've acquired. And then secondly, the young person is able to express and engage in a growth path. So they're not just stuck in one task, but they have an opportunity to have a career growth. And that's what we'd say traditionally, you want to get a job that has a future. And we've seen that opportunity. And third is that they have dignified pay. Their rates of pay are at best the same rate as you get in a local job, and sometimes even higher. So yes, they are in many ways dignified jobs and many opportunities. And I'll add on to that, as the world continues progressing and we look at the changes in terms of demographics, we see that in the north and the west, we are seeing more and more of those population graphs looking at older people being the majority. But when you come to the African side, it's the other way around.
It's the young people.
You have the opportunity of young people, or what we call the demographic dividend, being an advantage for the continent as opposed to being a liability.
You've been involved in advising, African governments on how, they can leverage on technology to create jobs and, transformation and development. Which areas do you think African governments have been able to get it right?
I must laud the African governments. I think the last couple of years we've seen a more focused and intentional engagement in the digital economy. There are governments such as Kenya. I think we have a couple of other governments where even the title of the ministries have changed to reflect the ambitions of the countries. We've also seen countries laying out their medium-term and long-term visions, and we see digital economy being core to these components of how nations are seeing themselves transforming and leapfrogging from being small countries to middle income and going up the ladder. Where do we see opportunities for governments? One, it starts from that point of the visioning, that the planning process is now inclusive and very, very integrated in leveraging and using technology. I think the second part we've seen a great deal of investment and progress is we are seeing more of the policy environments attracting investments and collaborative partnerships with the private sector. There is no government that would be able to take on the entire challenge of moving at the pace that the sector is moving. But we are seeing more and more of governments being open to different models and different ways in which they can attract the private sector. And third is we are seeing a more engaging and collaborative process, not just with private sector. So when we look at, for example, the academia would traditionally not be on the table in terms of planning or thinking through this, but we are seeing more and more of governments inviting the academia, private sector and other stakeholders to not just plan and think through what the future would look like, but in the implementation of programs and interventions, and the results are obvious.
Are there African, governments or African countries that you think we can have, maybe we can take a leaf from them, one or two, for Kenya? In terms of digital transformation and all that?
That's an interesting question, because Kenya itself is a leader. When you look at the sub-Sahara aspect of and the digital economy, Kenya is a leader in many ways. We've many times talked about the story of M-Pesa, innovation, and Kenya continues to attract a big chunk of the innovation funds and investments that are happening here. Kenya has a vibrant talent pool that has young people who are willing to be entrepreneurial and looking at solutions. That said, there are other components in other countries where we've seen some progress. We've seen policy environments that are more agile, and I think we are more inclusive, not just inclusive, but they're looking at the context of the country, and I think that's a lesson that Kenya would pick
Rwanda?
from. Rwanda would be a good example. I think the manner in which the government has leveraged technology, integrated it across in health sector, in education sector, in government services is a good example for Kenya to learn from or improve on it. We've also seen greater investments in terms of programs. One example is a program that just launched in West Africa, in Nigeria, where you see the private sector and public sector amassing a huge amount of resources directed at accelerating results. And I think these are lessons that we can continue drawing from. But I must also say that Kenya remains a leader and an example, but that also puts pressure on it to ensure that it is doing the right thing and it is keeping that pace setting.
The challenge of having, we have all these. It's a very huge animal in terms of what it is, but how do we make sure that digital transformation, the use of AI, does not go on the other side? There are governments, of course, very, they think it's a risk. It's a risky affair in terms of disinformation, misinformation, and misuse of it. It can even collapse governments, right? How is it to be regulated?
Governing in the Age of AI, we did a paper titled Governing in the Age of AI, and it is looking at some of those challenges. What should a public sector senior leader think about? What do the government think about with regards to ensuring that the safety of its citizens, but also the continuity? AI overall has far more advantages than we would say disadvantages. Yeah. But being a new technology, you need to make considerations and that ensures that you're also protecting the interest of the citizens. One of the things that we've noticed about AI and the advent of AI is the level at which we are participating as African governments. African governments so far are still playing at the point of picking the technology from other areas and other regions, which means that they come with a bias, they come with the limitations of not having the context of Africa. Yeah. And I think the challenge for the African governments is to come together to ensure that they are at the foundational level of AI. Yeah. And that is at the infrastructure level, the talent that is being developed, as well as the solutions that are being developed. Okay. It is critical that we see that from the African governments. Okay. The second part is what you've said, the ethics and the concerns around that. And I'm sure you've heard a lot about aspects to do with data and data protection and sovereignty. And these are good advents for the African government. But they must while we are protecting the interest of the country and concerned about the risks, and government being concerned about the risk, on the other side is also the opportunity to shape and to develop the right policies and environment that ensures we are getting the advantage of AI while at the same time protecting. So in things like data, we need to be more creative as governments, and especially Africa, in how we can avail our local data to shape how AI is being used.
Thank you. Thank you. That has been Patrick Mwangi Karanja, who is a Senior Manager for Technology and Digital Transformation for Africa at Tony Blair Institute for Global Change, also known as TBI. Thank you so much for making time for KBC. Now we move on. National Treasury Cabinet Secretary John Mbadi says some concerns in the Finance Bill 2026 have either been misinterpreted or wrongly linked to the withdrawn Finance Bill 2024. Mbadi says the government's intention is to simplify the tax framework while supporting revenue collection without overburdening Kenyans. Take a look.
Clarify several tax proposals under the Finance Bill 2026 following widespread debate over their potential impact on Kenyans. At the center of the discussion is a proposal touching on taxation of mobile phones, which Treasury Cabinet Secretary John Mbadi says has largely been misunderstood. Mbadi says the proposed 25% excise duty on mobile phones is not a new tax, but rather part of a plan to simplify the current taxation framework on imported devices.
VAT will be charged at every single step. And you see the danger with that, and we have explained, is that phones that are brought and put in the store, which have not been sold, the vendor has already paid taxes, reducing their liquidity. We are saying we are replacing all that complicated system with a simple one, where you bring the phone, there is no tax, there is no charges, there is no levy, but the time the phone is bought and is being activated is when you pay one single tax, that is excise duty at 25%.
He says mobile phones are currently subject to multiple taxes and levies, including VAT, excise duty, import declaration fees, and the Railway Development Levy, creating a cumulative tax burden of more than 55%.
So if enacted, mobile phones will no longer be subject to 16% VAT, 2.5% import declaration fee, and a 2% railway development levy under the proposed framework. The 25% import duty will also be removed upon implementation of the new tax regime, thereby simplifying the tax structure and lowering the overall domestic tax burden applicable to mobile phones.
There have been concerns from the youth and content creators that the 25% excise duty on phones could slow digital access and online livelihoods. He has also dismissed reports that the finance...
And that's where we end our news coverage on KBC Channel 1 for now. My name is Giverson Maina. Our sign language interpreter is Lensa Odingo. Thank you for watching and continue enjoying the rest of the day.
The 5th East Africa Broadcasters Convention will be held on the 26th to 28th of May 2026 at Emara Ole Sereni Hotel, Nairobi. We expect 200 delegates across the region. We are going to discuss a lot of things. The theme for this year's East Africa